Hey, this is Ramon. Channel is Alpha 4, and this is part of my biblical series, my Bible study on Genesis, and this is Genesis 9. And I'm going to do something I've been forgetting to do. I'm going to do a little recap. So, Noah and his family are on top of Mount Ararat. They have begun to descend onto the earth, and in doing so, God gives them a sign of peace or of reassurance. In the ensuing days, Noah decides to celebrate. He creates wine or alcohol for the first time, gets drunk, something untoward happens, and Ham is cursed. So, let's go into the actual story. So, a covenant is made. And this seems to intimate to me the rules in the beginning seem to tell me that there is, if you go back to Genesis 1, Genesis 2, and Genesis 3, there's a rule there, an unspoken rule, that a lot of modern philosophers have read into it, that there is a rule of vegetarianism, that vegetarianism is the correct way to live, it is the most peaceful way to live. But the problem happens with man being violent by nature, and so that has to change to the prohibition of eating blood, because man's violence can't be overcome. But it's deeper than that, because this rule applies to the animals as well. It says, do not kill a man, lest you too shall be killed. So that's interesting that even animals are subject to the law, and even animals can sin. And that goes to the deeper understanding that the earth itself is a living creature, is a creation. And so by earth being a creature, by rocks being a creature, by water being a creature, you can expound on that and say that time itself is a creature, is a thing made. So that's very interesting to think that nature itself can sin and is subject to God's law. Interesting. And remember that there's a modern Christian way to look at that, which is showing that the ancient deities who were represented or represented these abstracts or were represented by these things are now subject to the one true God. So like the bull and the snake and the ram, the sun, the waters, all of these were ancient gods and goddesses. So time itself, Chronos, are all subject to God's law, to the one true God. But considering that there's no guarantee that the ancient Hebrews knew of those gods from those other cultures, that is very interesting, because then you get to the theological basis for the understanding of universal human dignity. So this is the likeness of God. So you don't want animals killing people, because people bear the likeness of God. Therefore, all human beings have value, regardless of race, gender, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of culture, regardless of their sins, great or minimal, regardless of their goodness, whether their goodness is great or minimal, regardless of any of that, there is something in them divine, and therefore something of value. And at one point in the telling, that dignity also applied to all living creatures, meaning animals. So in the Christian idea, that goes into the whole human beings are the stewards of earth, and it's their job as the custodians to take care of the earth and protect the earth. So environmentalism aside though, then we get to the rainbow, which is a bow turned away from the earth, and this is a warrior symbol. This is a way for warriors to show peace. So instead of having a an archery bow pointed at you, you would turn it up like this. And that's not a sign of victory. That's a sign of, hey, we're coming in peace. Our bows are not turned at you. So that's interesting. Then we get into Ham, which the story itself doesn't say anything happened. It just says that he saw his father naked while his father was drunk. Basically, Ham had walked by, and I think his father was in a cave, although in some stories he's by a rock, and he saw him exposed, and he, I don't know, laughed or whatever, and then he called his brothers over and said, "Hey, look what this idiot's doing," basically. And although in the text it doesn't actually say that much, he just simply tells his brothers, "Hey, look at what he's done," and somehow that's enough to curse him and his descendants into slavery and servitude. And my original understanding of that, and this is a very academic understanding, to be honest about it, is that it was the writer's way of justifying the social economic situation of his time of the Canaanites. But it gets a little deeper with further readings. And when I was younger and I would read this story, the punishment always seemed very unfair to me. It seemed very unjust. While I understood that there was a sin there and there was a something that should be corrected, cursing him for all time and cursing his descendants to be slaves seemed way extreme for what amounted to he made fun of his father. So there are different understandings of that, though, which is that Ham's sin here could actually be seen as a condemnation by the writer on the sexual practices of the Canaanites. Okay? And so, while to me, and to a very surface understanding, Ham's official sin was shaming his father, there is an idea or a hint of some kind of sexual impropriety that was happening in the Canaanite culture, which Ham is supposed to be the ancestor of. And that gets into favoritism and alienation in the family. Basically, one of the sons is very clearly the favorite son, and one of the sons is very clearly cursed, or the hated son. And then there's the one in the middle who's like, yeah, you're going to have a good life too. Your ancestors will be intense. So it is very interesting that even in this very small, this new first family, there's already alienation and favoritism and a little bit of ignoring and a little bit of family dynamics that we would see in society in the larger whole. So that's an interesting interpretation, considering that we have now reintroduced humanity for a second time, if not a third, into this story. And we've recreated everything multiple times now. So now we're going to get into the next chapter.